Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Nice to see you all again. This is just going to be a quick rant. A rant born out of pure desperation and misery. It's about Japanese and what a terrible language it's turning into. It's basically about the sheer density, the sheer frequency of occurrence now of just so many words of English origin in Japanese. As some of you may know, I teach Japanese. I teach it online, and I have a regular student, and often when we're doing a bit of Japanese conversation in a lesson, we don't know how to say a certain word in Japanese, so we look it up. Because we're dedicated students, we don't just bluff our way through. When we don't know how to say something, we look it up. We try to expand our vocabularies, we look it up. And these days it always seems to be just some bloody English word that the Japanese have taken from us. We were trying to look up the word for audio as opposed to video the other day, and you think oto, on something, onshitsu would be sound quality, so sound something, audio. Anyway, we look it up. Obviously there are various different online dictionaries you can use. There's one I use, my student has one he uses, so we sort of compare what we find to try and figure out a way forward. And I swear most of it's just English words these days. Audio or whatever it was. He found that, not me, but consultanto, as they'd say in Japanese, I suppose, for consultant. So much stuff. It's just English being spat out. I remember when I used to live in Japan, and obviously I would speak Japanese all the time there, and my Japanese was pretty good, but sometimes I didn't know how to say something, so I Japanify the pronunciation of an English word, and often of course you'll be understood, because Japanese people, even when they don't speak English particularly well, they know lots of English words, either as English words or because those English words have already percolated across into Japanese and they know them as gairaigo, loanwords. Anyway, when I used to live in Japan, and when I had to resort to doing that, I was never quite sure what I was doing. Was I still speaking Japanese? Was I speaking some sort of Japanese, English, Creole? Was I being pathetic and just using lots of English words because my Japanese wasn't good enough? It would depend on the word, the context, who I was talking to. It gives you this real sense of uncertainty when you have to do that. And it seems to me that I'm not really in contact that much with Japanese media anymore. Don't spend much time working with it. But it seems to me that the problem has probably got worse. Now, from the perspective of the Japanese, there may of course be no problem. They may say, hey, that's Japanese, that's what it's like these days. But from my perspective, there's a problem. It makes me feel very awkward and uneasy when I start injecting all of these English words into Japanese without knowing to what extent they've been accepted by the Japanese, how many people will actually understand them, whether they're stuck now in the language, or whether they have stuck, if you like, or whether in 5 years they'll have been forgotten again, whether they're being used as part of some sort of fad, or whether they're words that have really gone all the way in, like keiki or chocolate or things like that. There's something about learning to speak an alien language that is absorbing words at a rate of knots from your language that really makes you feel uncomfortable. You don't know where you are with it. You feel stupid using all these words, but often it turns out that the Japanese use those words anyway, and in many cases actually prefer those words to the original words they had in Japanese that were similar to a greater or lesser extent to these new loanwords. It's quite interesting. Psychologists, cultural theorists, social linguists, all of these people could discuss the reasons for this mass borrowing of English words by the Japanese. But the reasons can be whatever they are. The reality is that Japanese is almost turning into some sort of strange Creole language. In Creoles, you have the idea of, what do they call it again? I think they call it a feeder language. They call it a feeder language. When you have a Creole language, a language that's a hybrid of two other languages, you can talk about the grammar having been effectively taken from one language, with the vocabulary having been predominantly taken from another language, to a greater or lesser extent. Obviously, it's not purely black and white. The situation isn't purely black and white. But I do wonder whether in 50 years Japanese might have turned into some sort of strange and unexpected Creole of a Japanese grammar base and English vocabulary. Obviously, there are many words in Japanese that cannot be replaced by English loanwords. Fundamental grammar words, function words, the particles, the particle wa, or the particles wa, ga, o, ni. These are not going to be replaced by English words, I shouldn't imagine. But sometimes you look at a script or a scrap of Japanese online on the internet, and you have something wa, something des, and the two somethings are both loanwords. Chocolate wa tasty des, or whatever. I made that up. Tasty has presumably not gone across into Japanese yet, but I wouldn't put it past them. Somebody somewhere has probably said tasty de gozaimasu, or something silly like that. It's a very strange, is it very strange? Maybe it's not that strange a phenomenon. Of course, these sorts of linguistic borrowings are taking place constantly. English is full of French words, and has obviously words from Latin and Greek and other languages too. But the speed of it, the rate of it, between languages that are not at all related to each other organically. Also, of course, English loanwords in Japanese are going to be written with katakana. And they're not the only words that are written with katakana in Japanese, but I would imagine that 99% approximately of all katakana in Japanese today stems from the adoption of English loanwords into Japanese. So you're talking about a phenomenon that not only changes the lexicon of the language, you're talking about a phenomenon that's actually radically altering the way it looks on the page. And I always profoundly dislike that. Hey, it's their language, they can do whatever they want with it, right? But I personally think that katakana are generally quite ugly. And when you see native Japanese words, or what are in effect Chinese loanwords, jukugo, kango, gradually being sort of leached out of the language and replaced with English origin katakana words, if you like, I always feel a little bit sad when I see that. It seems like a terrible corruption of something that, of course, was and is quite beautiful, judged from a certain point of view. Of course, English is doing this to lots of different languages to a greater or lesser extent. I read an article a couple of years ago about Greece and the effect that English was having on Greek, the rate of change, the number of words being adopted, elderly people not being able to read the newspapers, or not being able to read certain sorts of books or magazines, or not being able to understand the way young people spoke. This is happening everywhere. To a greater or lesser extent. The Chinese, of course, or maybe you don't know, but the Chinese are still pretty resistant to this. I'm studying Chinese at the moment, and it would be easier if the Chinese had the same number of loanwords in their language, English loanwords, that the Japanese do. But I appreciate the fact that I still feel like Chinese is just Chinese. And loanwords from English and Chinese don't even sound like English. Most of the time you can't even tell that they're loanwords from English, because they are pronounced very differently, and they are still written, of course, with Chinese characters, which makes a big difference. When you look at a block of text, you can't tell at a glance what's what. Anyway, that's a story for another time. Yeah, I feel uncomfortable about this, but I'm not sure that I have the right to. After all, Japanese isn't my language. It's not for me to tell them what to do. It is whatever it is. And any French person complaining about the French origin words in English would presumably be laughed at or stared at weirdly. But having said that, of course, that happened a long time ago. And we can just take it for granted now, in a way that you can't really take these English words in Japanese for granted. Anyway, this is me rambling. I don't have anything particularly useful to say about it. I just wondered, I suppose, if other people respond as viscerally as I do to this proliferation of English words in Japanese and the way they seem to affect the language and our experience of learning it, because as students of Japanese we're allowed to have our own opinions about the process and about the language, I suppose. Anyway, that's about it. I'm gonna sign off. Thanks for listening, if you are listening. Any questions, comments, suggestions for other videos, I'd be very happy to take a look at them. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao ciao. Bye bye.